What is a good example of something that is counterintuitive? Story 1. I once read a story about someone who was looking to get rid of an old television set that they didn't want anymore, so they put it out by the curb with a sign that said free TV. People would walk by, give it a quick glance, and keep on walking. What is going on here? Don't people want a free TV? The guy asking himself. Then he had a brilliant idea. He changed the sign to say, TV 2000 or best offer. Inquire inside. It was stolen within a minute. What's counterintuitive? Sometimes free isn't the best deal you can get. Story 2. During World War II, statistician Abraham Wald was asked to help the British decide where to add armor to their bombers. After analyzing the records, he recommended adding more armor to the places where there was no damage. The RAF was initially confused. Wald had data only on the planes that returned to Britain, so the bullet holes that Wald saw were all in places where a plane could be hit and still survive. The planes that were shot down were probably hit in different places than those that returned, so Wald recommended adding armor to the places where the surviving planes were lucky enough not to have been hit. Story 3. I know of a couple who had puppies to give away and no takers. They changed the ad in the paper to read free puppies. 5 cute, 1 ugly. They were all adopted the next day by people coming to get the poor ugly puppy. Story 4. I read somewhere that in order to get someone to like you, you need to ask them to do something nice for you, not the other way around. Ben Franklin was also of the same opinion. Edit. So I messed up the source a bit. It's the Ben Franklin effect. Story 5. Greater car safety. Anything that makes drivers feel safe driving faster puts people in danger, because pedestrians. Harder helmets can put football players in danger, because they allow harder hits and do nothing for concussions. Boxing gloves make boxing more dangerous for similar reasons. Story 6. The unexpected hanging paradox. A judge sentences a prisoner to be hanged at 12 noon one day next week, Monday through Friday. The execution will be a surprise to the prisoner, i.e., the prisoner will not be able to deduce the day of the execution until he is actually taken away at noon on the day of. So the prisoner goes back to his cell and starts to reason, it can't be Friday of course, because if he's still alive Thursday, he knows it'll be Friday and thus, not a surprise, this leaves Monday through Thursday. Now it can't be Thursday either. If Wednesday goes by, and he's still alive, he would know the execution date would be Thursday since Friday is out, thus it wouldn't be a surprise. Now it's down to Monday through Wednesday. It can't be Wednesday either because if Tuesday goes by and he's still alive, he'd know it has to be Wednesday, since by the logic before it can't be Thursday. If it was, it wouldn't be a surprise, thus, since it wouldn't be a surprise, Wednesday's out too, now it's down to either Monday or Tuesday. Using the same reasoning as before, it can't be Tuesday, since if Monday goes by and he's still alive, he'd know it'd be Tuesday, since it can't be Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, with only Monday left, it obviously can't be a surprise because it's only one option. So the prisoner goes to bed and is comforted by the fact that according to his reasoning, he cannot be executed on any day. Then on Tuesday at noon, he hears a knock on the door. It's the executioner. He says, surprise motherfucker. And contrary to the prisoner's reasoning, it was actually a surprise motherfucker. Edit. I should note that there is no consensus among scholars as to the resolution of this paradox. Despite an enormous amount of academic literature over several decades, a good summary of arguments and different schools of thought can be found here. Story 7. Hey race, my favorite one. Imagine a rigid wire tightly wrapped around the Earth. Assume the Earth is a perfect sphere. It is wrapped so tightly nothing can get beneath it. It is essentially hugging the Earth. Cut the wire and weld in an extra section 1 m in length 3 feet for you Americans. As the wire is now longer than the Earth's circumference, it will pop off the ground by a small way, around the whole Earth. How high do you think this wire will sit? High enough for an air molecule to slide beneath. How about a sheet of paper? Nope, the wire would sit about 16 centimeters 6 inches above the Earth, the whole way around the globe. Story 8. If you fly past me in a relativistic spacecraft, I will see your clock run slow, but for you, your clock runs just fine and my clock runs slow. It's actually not a paradox. Story 9. Hey race, a list of counterintuitive things from game theory. This list originally comes from here and has links for explanations. People often take aggressive postures that lead to mutually bad outcomes even though mutual cooperation is mutually preferable. Even if everyone agrees that an outcome is everyone's favorite, they might not get that outcome. Sometimes having fewer options is better than having more options. On a penalty kick, soccer players should kick more frequently toward their weaker side as their weaker side becomes increasingly inaccurate. In a duel, both gunslingers should shoot at the same time, even if one is a worse shot and would seem to benefit by walking closer to his target. There's a reason why gas stations are on the same corner and politicians adopt very similar platforms. And it's the same reason. Closing roads can improve everyone's commute time. Fewer witnesses to a crime might be preferable to more. You should bid how much you value the good at stake in a second price auction. If you pay the value you think something is worth, you are going to end up with a negative net profit. Lighting money on fire is often profitable. Going to college can be valuable even if college doesn't teach you anything. An animal might be better off jumping high in the air repeatedly than running away from a predator. Knowing just slightly more about the value of your car than a potential buyer can make it impossible to sell it. Nigerian email scammers should say they are from Nigeria even though just about everyone is familiar with the scam. Everyone might mimic everyone else just because two people chose to do the same thing. A biased media may be better than an unbiased media. Every voting system is manipulable. You might want to abstain from voting even though you strictly prefer one candidate to another. Unanimous jury rulings are more likely to convict the innocent than simple majority rule if jurors vote intelligently. The House of Representatives caters to the median member of the majority party, not the median member of the institution overall. Plurality voting leads to two-party systems. United Nations Security Council members sometimes do not veto resolutions even though they strongly dislike them. Without the ability to propose offers, you receive very few benefits from bargaining. Settlements always exist that are mutually preferable to war. Fighting wars removes the need for war. You might want to shoot to miss in war. Non-proliferation agreements can be credible. Weapons inspections are useful even if they never find anything. Economic sanctions are useful even though they often fail in application. Pitchers shouldn't change their pitch selection with a runner on third base. Even though curveballs are more likely to result in wild pitches, sports teams can benefit from a lack of player safety in contract negotiations. You shouldn't try to maximize your score in words with friends Scrabble. In speed sailing, competitors deliberately choose paths they believe will be slower. The first player wins in Connect 4. Checkers ends in a draw. Chess has a solution, though we don't know it yet, or maybe not. Warren Buffett was never going to pay $1 billion the winner of the March Madness Bracket Challenge. Park Place is worthless in McDonald's monopoly. Losing pays. As drug tests become more accurate, they should be implemented less often. Again, the original post is here game theory is really counterintuitive. Story 10 Jealousy. The motivator for that behavior is that you want to keep your partner, but more often than not jealousy will actually have the opposite effect and make them break up with you. Story 11 Every planet in our solar system could fit between Earth and the Moon. Source. Story 12 I remember reading once about something today referred to as Cobra economics. It's when you try to do something beneficial and end up causing more harm. It started in the 1800s when Britain was in control of India. They had a huge problem with the cobras all over the place accidentally biting people and just being a pain in the... They fought the cobra problem by saying that they would pay anyone who brought them a dead cobra 002. Since India was very poor, people would hunt these cobras all day and show up with wagon fulls. There was a problem though. The cobra population wasn't decreasing. When the British started raiding homes, they found out that since everyone was so poor, it was actually more lucrative to raise cobras in their basement and then slaughter them for a salary. This understandably pissed off the British, so they ended the dead cobra purchasing program. So now you have a bunch of guys with basements full of valueless cobras, so they released them into the street. Overall, Britain tried to kill off the cobras, but actually ended up having vastly more cobras on the street. Story 13 If you notice you are retaining water, you might think that the solution is to drink less water, but actually, drinking more water ends water retention. Seems counterintuitive if you only notice the retention and not the reasoning behind it. Story 14 Riding motorcycles and bikes. You actually steer the handlebars into the opposite direction of the turn, i.e., you steer the handlebars right to turn left. Story 15 1 billion is larger than you might imagine. You might think, 1,000 million, doesn't sound that big, but think this way: 1,000,000 seconds is 11 days, close to a fortnight. 1 billion seconds is over 31 years, that's half a lifetime. $1 billion is mad money. Or maybe it also goes to show how our lifetimes are shorter than we might imagine. Edit just to clarify. Here I assume that most wouldn't have intuitively made out 1 billion to be this large. I understand that this post might not have something to do with heuristics, which are commonly associated with counterintuitive thoughts, but I still think that this post falls under the general definition. Story 16 The Cantor set and just about every topological property there is. For those starting analysis, if your proof works on the Cantor set, it is probably correct. Alternatively, it is also an excellent counterexample to many erroneous assumptions you may have about topology. Oops, I thought it was Ramath. Ah well. Story 17 Free MMORPGs. They're fun to play in beta, but they'll never be a major contender if you don't charge. I read an article once that hit the nail on the head. If people pay even a minuscule fee, they're more invested, financially and emotionally, and will tend to take advantage of that investment. A one-time purchase charge doesn't qualify. If they never have to make a repeating investment, they'll play it for about the amount of time they feel they've paid for, and lose interest. If they pay a recurring fee, they continue to feel invested, and feel a responsibility to themselves to get what they paid for. This is one major reason World of Warcraft has survived as long as it has, and continues to be the go-to as people lose interest in all the other MMORPGs they play. Ion and Guild Wars 2 are just two excellent examples. They both had other issues that caused them to lose high-level players, but to some degree those players lost interest in even trying to overcome the flaws because they didn't feel invested financially. Story 18 Percentages. They seem obvious, but most people don't understand them that well. For example, suppose a stock rises by 50 on Monday, and then decreases by 50 on Tuesday. Is the stock's value back to where it started? Nope, it's now worth less than it was in the first place. If this happened again and again and again, its price rising by 50 and then dropping by 50 every other day, its value would eventually shrink to zero. Each up-down cycle reduces the original value by 25. Story 19 Religious women. Many religions endorse misogyny, rape, murder, disfigurement, and subjugation of women. Edit if you downvote. I'm open to enlightenment. Please explain.
Story 20 My favorite anagram of Banaktarski is Banaktarski Banaktarski.
Story 21. Americans hate politicians, yet when one comes to speak in our neighborhood, we turn out in droves to listen to their lies. Case in point, I grew up in a staunchly Republican part of Indiana, and in 20 years I had never heard a kind word said about Hillary Clinton. But when she planned to give a speech in my hometown during the 2008 election, the whole city was abuzz for a week. Her appearance dominated all the newscasts and people camped out overnight to hear an 8 p.m. speech the next day. Story 22. Purchase orders at work, $75 for a piece of software or some kind of thingy we need for day-to-day operation. Finance turn into rabid dogs and only say no if we take it to the CEO for signature. He says, "Why do we need this? What is it? I don't understand." And more often than not, he just says, "Go figure it out. Don't bother me." Show up with an order for $75,000 for a whole pile of unrelated things, calling it 6-month supply catch-up, including a few big-ticket items, and finance wills I owe. This is serious, and the boss will say, "Do we need it? Look me in the face and tell me we need it." Okay, you win. Approved. Story 23. Just because you can define some property that may or may not hold for some object does not mean that there exists a collection of all such objects. For an example where there fails to be such a collection, see Russell's paradox. Story 24. Making your bed, since you'll eventually sleep in it anyways, and that up, OCD, eating while shitting. I've done this more times than I care to admit. Story 25. I've always thought it interesting that when you go through the self-checkout lines at a grocery store, the faster and sloppier you try to scan a barcode, the more often it works. Story 26. It's a Greek legend, but some say it's true. According to legend, although Capodistrias ordered that potatoes be handed out to anyone interested, the population was reluctant at first to take advantage of the offer. The legend continues that he then ordered that the whole shipment of potatoes be unloaded on public display on the docks of Nafplion, and placed it under guard to make the people believe that they were valuable. Soon, people would gather to look at the guarded potatoes, and some started to steal them. The guards had been ordered in advance to turn a blind eye to such behavior, and soon the potatoes had all been stolen, and Capodistria's plan to introduce them to Greece had succeeded. Story 27. You can never realistically feed all the world's hungry. The nature of a population is to expand to its limits. For virtually all wild populations, that limit is its food supply. This very much includes humans. If you feed all the world's people, they will simply birth more people until we cannot feed them all. It's really a pretty simple concept, yet few people tend to grasp it. Birth control could eventually change this paradigm, but it's unlikely to happen anytime soon. Kind of similarly to this, the more financial aid you give college students, the more financial aid college students will need. Financial aid tends to drive up college costs over time. Story 28. Common Core math. Instead of how we learned it, now it's this really confusing. Story 29. Having money in savings when you also have debt. The amount you pay in interest will always be more than you earn in savings. Pay off your debt first. You're losing money otherwise. Story 30. To effectively lose body fat, one's diet that most of the calories consumed should come from fats followed by proteins and a minute amount of complex carbs to keep blood sugar stable. You're changing how your body stores and metabolizes fat. In effect, you're making the body see it as an energy source to be utilized rather than stored and hoarded. Story 31. Everything connected. I want that freaking file on my computer ASAP, but the intuitive cloud service won't let me do it easily. Plus shitty internet connection. God, I miss cables. Story 32. The way our memory and decision-making is made. Each time you recall a memory, you are actively recreating it. It's not like retrieving a file from a computer. In addition to that, we think things are more likely if we have more memories of that thing happening. Which seems like a worse disaster, car crash or plane wreck. Which is more likely to happen to you? Which one are you actually worried about? Story 33. Raising taxes might not have a positive net effect on public finances. In fact, the effect might be negative depending on the current tax burden. A lot of people have a very difficult time grasping this context. Maybe because it is counterintuitive, and maybe because they just don't want it out of political reasons. It's really not more counterintuitive than a store losing profit from raising prices. Story 34. If caught in the jaws of a boa constrictor, push your caught limb into the direction of its throat as someone else holds open its jaws because the teeth are angled inward. That is, of course, if you have someone around you strong enough to hold open its jaws. I only know this from watching a show on TV. No experience in this, thankfully. Story 35. Veblen goods are a good example of something that is counterintuitive. Veblen goods are goods for which the quantity demanded goes up as price goes up, which you wouldn't expect since price going up should make people want to buy less of a thing. Story 36. Countersteering. For example, turning a motorcycle at speed involves pushing the handlebars in the wrong direction. Edit link. Story 37. The Mpemba effect. Assuming all other conditions are equal, warmer water freezes faster than cooler water. Mind blown. Story 38. Fluid flow through a pipe. The pressure actually increases when the fluid flows through an area of the pipe with a larger cross-section, and decreases when it flows through a smaller cross-sectional area. Story 39. Lighter roasted coffee has more caffeine total. I don't know why that's counterintuitive to people though. How would roasting add caffeine? Of course, darker roasts have more caffeine by weight. Story 40. If you cross the outer edge of the universe, you are still in the universe. The universe is theorized to be in an impossible to conceive shape, one where if you somehow escape through one side of it, you just end up on the opposite side. Story 41 slurry is counterintuitive if you don't know how flour works. It used to confuse the out of me as a kid. You're adding a liquid to thicken the gravy, but it's a liquid. Story 42 the navigation in BMWs. You turn the dial to the right to zoom out and to the left to zoom in. To visualize, this is the opposite of how a screw works. Story 43 you need an established credit history in order to get approved for a reasonable loan credit card, which is the only real way to build credit, unless you buy into the system young. It's a pain in the to fix it later. Buying a car, putting half down $10K, want a loan for the rest, 14 interest or get a cosigner. Want to buy a very reasonable house, have ample income to support the loan, and list liquid assets near the value of the loan on the application. Too bad, insufficient credit history. Happened this week, and that's with a 690 credit score from 1 year of a co-signed auto loan and 4 months of a 1K limit cashbacked credit card that was all I could get approved for. Yes, I'm a little bitter about it. Story 44 I got another one. Supersonic flight. The faster you go, the less drag you experience and the more fuel-efficient flight gets. See the oft-posted State Route 71 Blackbird. Its top fuel efficiency was its top speed, and the only thing limiting its speed was heat. They would have to stop going faster because of thermal limits, not because they had no power or fuel. If the materials had let them go faster, they would have gone faster and been even more fuel efficient. Story 45 cancer cells do not divide faster than normal cells. The main difference is that normal differentiated cells are quiescent, but cancer cells still divide in an uncontrolled fashion. Even senior scientists I work with make this mistake when they describe cancer. Story 46 using disinfectant on everything in your house. Like in the commercials, the mom's got a bucket of bleach and is washing off all her kids' toys. If you do that, the kids' immune systems and your own won't be as strong, so by killing all the germs in your house, you're actually making it easier for you to get sick. I could be wrong about this one, but that's what I take from it. Story 47 when loading the back of a truck with furniture, people normally think that heavier objects won't move as much, but actually they'll move exactly the same as lighter objects. This is because their momentum is directly proportional to the force needed to break friction and slide them. Story 48 back during WI whenever planes would make it back from battle, the engineers would try and improve future plane designs by adding armor to the places that were more damaged, however the same amount of planes would survive. It was a mathematician named Abraham Wald who came up with the idea of adding more armor to the areas that were the least damaged. The reasoning for this was that any plane that made it back wasn't shot in a critical place. The planes that didn't make it back were, so by adding armor to the regions that didn't have as much damage on the survivors means that you are adding armor to the most critical areas. I probably explained it badly. Have a look at this. Story 49 one thing I can never quite wrap my head around. In hospitals, the big push right now is for observation units. Essentially, it is a unit dedicated to people expected to be in the hospital less than 24 hours. It uses less hospital resources, and in theory should be a lot more cost-effective, but it's not. It's often more expensive than admitting someone inpatient. Many insurance plans won't cover observation because it's so expensive because most insurance won't pay out for it, and the hospital has to make up the loss somewhere. God bless America. Story 50 aiding developing nations to decrease infant mortality, raise life expectancy and quality of life. And increasing women's rights helps to stop population growth because people feel more secure that the kids they have will survive so they have less kids. Also sending money to Planned Parenting facilities that offer abortions actually decreases abortions because people don't have to use illegal and unsafe abortion methods while also giving more money for programs which offer contraceptives. Story 51 some infinities are larger than others. For example, there are more total integers than there are even integers, even though there is an infinite amount of both. Number file video explaining what I mean, edit wording. Story 52 the difference between its and its. Its is the possessive one where every other example of possession I can think of in the English language ends in s or s. Story 53 counter-steering when riding a bike. If you turn the handlebars right you go left. It's why children have such a hard time learning to ride a bike. This matters more at greater speeds like on a motorcycle, edit source. Story 54 counter-steering on a motorcycle. You push on the handlebars the way you want the bike to go. Push down on the left handlebar causes the wheel to go right. The bike then leans left and goes left. Opposite for right. Takes a while to get used to. Story 55 on a motorcycle. If you're traveling under 10 miles per hour, you turn the handlebars left to go left and right to go right. If you go above 10 miles per hour, the controls reverse and you need to lean the bike to turn. Now you have to turn left to go right and right to go left. Story 56 Austrian economics, for example, it goes against everything people typically associate with inflation and deflation, though it does make a good case for why inflation and spending don't necessarily drive an economy. Story 57 touchpads on everything simply because touchscreens are cheap and trendy right now. My laptop has touchpad buttons for volume instead of normal tactile buttons. I have to look down and make sure I'm not pressing the wrong thing every time because I can't actually feel the button. The dual touchscreen laptop was the worst though. I had the unfortunate opportunity to use one in real life once. Story 58 credit versus debit in accounting. If you don't know why that would seem counterintuitive, then you probably haven't taken any college accounting classes. Edit corrected debt to debit. Sorry for the confusion. Story 59. I went windsurfing once and only got it when I finally stopped trying to lean forward when I felt myself falling backward and instead pulled the sail back hard with me, essentially falling more and catching the wind. Once that clicked, it was very cool. Story 60. If you're using your phone or nearly any other electronic device outside and it's bright out, you need to turn your screen's brightness higher than you would if it was dark out. Story 61. How many people are way more likely to express private issues, biases, emotions, or just idiotic comments when on Facebook with potentially hundreds or thousands of listeners than they are when in real human-to-human group interaction? Story 62. Push steering on bicycle and motorcycle. It is so counterintuitive that most people don't realize they do it, and will even wrongly argue that they don't. Story 63. Going to a ball game. Giving your ticket seats to the 85-year-old usher, then once she starts moving toward the seats, asking her where the seats are. Story 64. That the sun has a stronger force on the moon than the Earth does by about 2-3 times as much. It makes sense once you realize that the moon is going around the Earth, but it's also orbiting the sun as well. Math using force of gravity FGM1m2r2, then dividing the sun-moon by Earth-moon gives m sun 2 me or sun 2 where sun is the mass of sun, me is the mass of the Earth, or sun is the distance between the moon and sun. I just use the Earth-sun distance since they're the same and re is the distance between the Earth and the moon. Story 65. If you want someone to like you, ask them to do a small favor for you, you stay on their mind, because you are in their debt. In the opposite scenario, they can feel uncomfortable about you because they don't like to feel indebted. Story 66. Turn into the skid. Look where you want to go, not at the thing you're worried about hitting. Locking your brakes up in a straight line will stop you faster than ABS will on snow and gravel. Story 67. If you slowly defrost something in a fridge, it's safer from a food safety point of view than if you defrost in the microwave, but wouldn't you kill bacteria quicker more efficiently using a microwave? And wouldn't more bugs have a chance to grow during the 24 hours in the fridge? I'd love someone to explain this. Also, why is it bad to wash fish meat? Story 68. I heard of this story about this company that created and sold wine for $5 a bottle. It was doing poorly because no one wanted to buy $5 wine because it was considered cheap. So right before the company went bankrupt, the owner decided to change the name of the wine and sell it for $20 instead, and all of a sudden everyone started buying it and his company became successful. Story 69. While driving on snow ice, if you start sliding you shouldn't brake, but instead accelerate a bit, if possible in a lower gear as the tires have the most traction during acceleration. Story 70. For soccer penalty kicks. Kickers should kick straight down the middle. Goalies will almost always dive left or right trying to guess which side the kicker will kick. This leaves the middle open. The reason this doesn't happen is because of the mentality of the kickers. If they kick straight and the goalie doesn't move and makes the save, the kicker will look like a fool, but if he picks a side and the goalie dives and manages to block it, he can at least say he made a valiant effort in trying to score, even if he overshoots and misses the goal entirely. Story 71. Blaming other people for your problems. Sure, they might affect you to an extent, but what you choose to do with your life is up to you. Most people choose the same thing expecting different results. Story 72. Quantum mechanics. Human beings evolved in our ancestral past to avoid lions on the savannah, not to understand how tiny particles interact. The fact that things like the double-slit experiment and Schrödinger's cat are so baffling on initial approach is very good evidence of this. The good news is, the universe doesn't give a what we understand, and the more we learn about the quantum world, the more equipped we become with formulae and precedents to figure those tiny things out. Story 73. Under some circumstances, building more roads can increase traffic congestion. Some cities solve their traffic problems by closing down certain roads. Story 74. The more you talk about your goals, e.g. fitness, the less likely you are to achieve them. This is because stating your goals gives you the feeling of having accomplished them. Story 75. The reason gyroscopes work is not because they can magically stay stable. They work because the math makes it so the direction of rotation is different than the direction of the force applied. It's like poking something and having it move sideways as a result. Story 76. pH. Often understood to mean power of hydrogen, a measure of an acid's strength. Counterintuitively, the lower the pH, the higher the concentration of H ions dissolved in water because it is calculated with a negative in front of the log function which calculates it log H. Story 77. Turn into a skid. If you're a pilot and your plane stalls, you recover by pushing the yoke forward to drop the nose of the plane toward the ground rather than pull back. Story 78. In most cases when you are having issues controlling a vehicle, the following saying is true more often than not, but very counterintuitive: when in doubt, throttle out. Story 79. Not talking to your ex fresh after a breakup, like you really want to, and you just know it's the best thing to do, so counterintuitive, but really the best thing for both parties. Story 80. In logic we have conditional statements if P then Q, where P is the premise and Q is the conclusion. We also have stylistic variants of those statements: Q since P, P so Q, Q because P, etc. One of those stylistic variants goes P only if Q. So if I were to write a statement using that variant, it would look like a thing is a sun only if it is a star, but since you see the if, in your head you want to say that if it is a star then it is a sun, but no, it's if it is a sun, then it is a star. As a side note, I messed this up while writing it even though I know how it goes. Story 81. When riding a motorcycle or bicycle, to turn, you turn the bars the opposite direction. Think about it. To turn left, you push the left handlebar forward. Turning the wheel to the right, you're doubting me. Go get on a bicycle and try it. Note, you only do this at about walking speed or higher. At slow speeds you turn normally. This is called countersteering. We do it almost unconsciously. In fact, I've met riders who refuse to accept that this is what wet hay do. Countersteering is counterintuitive. Story 82. Steering a motorcycle. Basically, if you're going faster than 5 miles per hour, you've got to push the right side of your handlebar forward to turn right, or push the left forward to go left. I used to know why. It has something to do with the angular momentum of the front wheel. I will say that it's super weird when you're first learning. Story 83. The probability of finding 2 people with the same birthday is over 50 if there are at least 23 people in the room. But the probability of finding someone in the room with your birthday is over 50 if over 250 people are in the room. Story 84. It's a bit technical, but in economics high prices are not really determined by high cost of production. The high cost of production is determined by the high price you can get for your product. People will try to guess best marketable price of a new product, and then when it kicks off and new producers get into the market, everyone starts to offer more money to outbid the competition. That will last as long as you can have decent profit margin. So in reality, the higher price you can get for your product, the higher costs you will have in the long run. That's why heavily protected industries such as IT, movies, pharmaceuticals, etc. have higher salaries, etc. Story 85 from Jack Handy. If you saw 2 guys named Hambone and Flippy, which one would you think liked dolphins most? I'd say Flippy. Wouldn't you? You'd be wrong though, it's Hambone. Story 86. Homosexuality is important for humans to survive. Homosexuality improves our reproduction capability as a species because it makes there be more caregivers for less children, so the few children are very likely to survive. Story 87. If a woman is RH, and pregnant with an RH baby, we give her fake RH antibodies and it keeps her from becoming sensitized. I get it, but it's tough to understand at first. Story 88. When you're going fast on a motorcycle and you're turning, the tire is actually turned slightly in the other direction, so if you're turning right, the handlebars are pointed left to a small degree. Story 89. Fano line flow. Think of a low-speed fluid flow going through a pipe. Now imagine that the pipe walls have a lot of friction. You might think that the friction would somehow slow down the flow. In reality though, if the pipe is long enough then the outgoing flow will be traveling the speed of sound. Story 90. ITT. A lot of people just now figuring out that economics is a thing that people study. Also ITT. A lot of very obtuse people refusing to believe blatantly obvious things that economists and political scientists study for a living.